reading poetry, being inspired by it, and what is form? The best work is that which keeps its secret the longest. This is a quote from Paul Valéry, a French poet, essayist, and philosopher who was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature 12 times. He had some great quotes, including, "Poems are never finished, just abandoned," which will come in useful as you set to write your own poems. But the best work is that which keeps its secret the longest is one we're going to think about now. What do you think of this definition of the best work? And how do we feel about things keeping secrets? I'm Deanna Rodger, and I'm a poet. And my job for this masterclass is to talk to you about form in poetry. I like thinking about this quote when thinking about poetry, and especially when I don't get poetry, when it makes me sit with it, reread it, or re-listen to it. Two responses that have stuck with me in relation to this quote are, it's an ode to staying humble and modest and dedicated and not seeking glory because you have finished doing something. And the reader wants to work for their dinner, but they don't want to know that they are. Think of a film or TV series that you have watched where there is a mystery to be solved. As the audience, you are ready to watch and listen to everything and piece it all together in order to solve the mystery at the same time or even before the detective or whoever it is who's trying to solve it in the show. This is similar to poetry. Go into a poem with your ears open to hear and discover the play of sound, the deliberate action of poetry, the considered choices put in place to capture an experience. You see, writing poetry is a case of a feeling being seen. The feeling so personal and so unique finds it quite difficult to become something of value to anyone other than the person it has its roots in. It is fussy about its verbs and nouns, and it doesn't want to be bogged down in adjectives. It is quite simply nothing becoming something in relation to what it is not. The poet's job is to find that nothingness and place things around it in order to create its shape, its form. And not all poetry will be got. Even the most established poets don't know what makes the most brilliant poems brilliant. And we can break it down into craft and form, but ultimately it comes down to a feeling, a discovery, a transformation happening simultaneously between the poem and the reader. Trust that feeling. Trust when a reveal feels good to you as a writer and as a reader. And when you get a metaphorical smack in the face of your own writing, then you've pulled together craft and form and context and theme and surprised yourself with the poem's secret. So when going through these videos and completing the exercises, I welcome you to be surprised by your own writing. Before we start, I want to make sure you all have something you can use to capture your ideas. That may be a pen and paper or pencil and paper, but it might also be a laptop or a tablet or a phone. And it may be a voice recorder or someone else who can write things down for you. Whatever and whoever it is, make sure you have them with you now. Because to start us off, I'm wondering where you have all come from today. Where you have come from to find yourself here watching this video. So I've just come from Carland, Uberland. Perhaps you've just come from Sandwich Land, or fish finger sandwich land, or toothpaste land, or dreamland. Write a few of these down. For example, I would write, I've come from Uberland, I've come from Coffee Land, I've come from Email Land, I've come from Sleep Land, I've come from Excitement Land, I've come from the land of multi-grain hoops and baby bogies, I've come from the land of setting concrete holding heavy stills. Pause the video and spend a minute or so jotting these down using the full sentence, I have come from. Great. So if you've done that, you have a draft poem written in form. You may sigh and think, oh, Deanna, that's not a form. But there was a rule that you applied to your thoughts which has fixed their meter. I have come from, I've come from. This is an informal form, but form nonetheless. Form in poetry is a decision we can't help but make. Even when writing without form, we are making a decision to write in free verse. When I began writing, I shied away from a formal use of form poetry. To be honest, the internet wasn't really a thing and I didn't know where to go in order to fully grasp the role of language and form poetry. And you may feel this too. a little overwhelmed, baffled of form poetry, as if it doesn't speak to you or make sense as to why it's written in such a strict, fixed, seemingly unemotional style. You are not alone in any of these thoughts, but they don't have to be the lasting impression. Trusting the poem to come alive is key to reading poetry. Trusting that the poet had an intention and has packed it into the poem and it's there waiting to be resurrected is the game of poetry. So read, read, read aloud as much as you can. Scan, glance, gobble, just keep reading, and if something in you doesn't get it, reread and scribble down all the questions it brings up, even if that question is, what on earth is going on here? By asking the questions, answers will be found. And if it really isn't working for you, then move on. Not every poem is for every person. Keep reading, scanning, gobbling until you find one that serves you. In this masterclass, we'll be looking at informal form writing in poetry. As I mentioned, we are now in the age of the internet. So forms such as the villanelles, sestinas, sonnets, pantoums, they're quite Googleable. So we're going to look at some forms I think are emerging and seemingly straightforward, but have a huge impact on the reader-listener if crafted with intention and consideration. We're going to read poems together, we're going to unpack them, and with careful guidance from me, we're going to write no fewer than 4 different types of poems. We'll look at a how-to poem, a list poem, a palindrome, and a golden shovel. Feel free to pause the video to complete the tasks, but make sure you watch them in order, as we'll be building on your work. My top tip is always to save original drafts so that you can revisit them and see how far your writing develops. So, if you still haven't, grab your writing equipment. Let's get to it.